Hello and welcome to another episode of Movies That Make Us. I'm Jake.
I'm Tracy.
And I'm Val, Jake's and Tracy's dream killer for the day.
Well, I don't know if it'll be mine. I'm going to be okay with whatever you want to say here, but I think
you
might
are
be a little bit of Tracy's.
Opinion, no matter how wrong it is, Val.
When Tracy dropped off the disc for this movie and he said, "This is good. It's familiar enough that you'll recognize it." I told him, I'm not a fan of this story, just generally speaking. This is not my favorite. It's never been my favorite Disney animated movie. And there's never been a version of it that I'm like, oh yeah, this is the one that hits home. So I already went in thinking, oh, okay, watch another version. We're talking about Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio today, and we'll get into it, I'm sure, but I'm sure we have a bunch of other shenanigans to talk about as well. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of the story anyway. So
yeah, I do want to give everybody a heads up that I am in my kitchen again, my dining room kitchen area again, this episode, and I have a pug rug cleaner that you'll just hear little. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Rhodey. So just to let you know, if you hear something that sounds like a pig eating,
he's such a cute dog.
He's a pug rug cleaner.
Oh, he's such a cute dog.
My kids make the same sound when they're eating too, by the way. So.
And I wanted to thank my sister for my bird mug that I have yet to put on the show.
I like that.
She got me this bird mug.
That's way cool.
That is very nice. A bird.
I love it.
It's a little inappropriate.
It's its name.
Yeah. Anywho.
For those that are just listening and not watching, they're like, what are they talking about?
I love birds, and my sister gave me a bird mug, and there is a crested tit on it, a great tit, a bearded tit, a long-tailed tit, and a blue tit.
That's the name.
Yeah.
It's science.
Those are all types of birds that people know about. I don't know what's inappropriate about that at all.
I don't either. I also want to say bird related. I now have an entire Magic the Gathering bird.
You got the complete
deck? It's a bird deck. I have my.
You got the deck done.
Yes.
This is a good update from last week where we were starting to build that.
Yeah.
Long, arduous, like cards everywhere. My sister's kids, Cam and Logan, came over and we put their decks together as well. We took a little run down to Oasis Games. Because they have like a system where there's a computer and you can just type in the card. It'll bring up all the cards. And if they have it, you put it on an order. That order goes to some person in the back room. And then they pull all these individual cards for you. And then they just call your order up. Dave, your order's ready. Here's your cards.
Wow.
And then you pay for them and you leave.
That's cool.
Yeah. I didn't like me and Cameron and Logan were new to Magic. And so we really we're just leaning heavily on Dave to help us put our decks together. But he pulled out his big thing of cards. He's got 5,000 cards. So we're all going through the cards. And I spent the day before pulling all the birds out and all the other things. And then they came over. And so, yeah, we were here for probably 5 hours the other night, just putting decks together. At some point I tapped out and I'm like, I gotta go bed. And, and they're young. They stayed up late.
Sometimes that can be overwhelming, though. Somebody pulls out 5,000 cards. I'm like, yeah, just pick what you want out of there. I'm going to be nervous until I've looked at every card that I didn't miss something really, really great in there somehow.
Well, but as soon as you have your commander and what colors you are, then he's like, here's all the blue cards. Here's all the green cards. Here's all the white cards. Here's the red cards. So I knew my colors. I knew kind of what I was looking for. And then so we pulled everything we thought we liked, and then we would hand it over to him and he'd be like, you don't need that. You don't need that. Oh, you need this one. And I'm like, what good thing are you giving away? He's like, no, that's better for their deck. But this is, I thought, what you would appreciate the most, Christmas lovers, is so Logan is putting together this deck that he just wants it to be green because he just wants big mammothy, monsters and everything. And Dave's like, you should add some red in there. If you want some big stompy things, you should add some red. And he just kept like pushing it aside. I'm just sticking to green. I'm sticking to green. And I'm like, but Logan, you could be Christmas. And he's like, yes. So he'll roll the red over.
That's awesome.
I'm in. I'm 100% in.
So Logan's the same as me. I'm like, ooh, that card's pretty. Let's put that in there. And Dave's like, no, you don't need that.
But I want it.
But it's so cute. Look at it.
I want it.
It's fun. You're saying all of these words like once you've picked your commander and you've got the reds and the greens.
Your leader.
Yeah. Well, I guess that it was something that was like, I just don't know how all of that plays into the game. We one time, this was years ago, my wife and I are like, everybody talks about this Magic the Gathering game. Let's buy ourselves like a starter deck and try it out. So we went to, first of all, it was a bad choice. We went to Target to buy our starter deck, which is fine. It's just there's nobody there to help you. It's just you're buying what's there and put together.
When you need him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I got that and we started going through it and we're like, we have no idea what we're doing. So we're like, we'll talk to some people. So we put it up in the shelf in our bedroom and it remains in the shelf in our bedroom because it just never has been so daunting.
I'm going to throw this out there. Okay. Dave has a lot of decks. And if you ever want to learn how to play, because I'm still learning, come over. You can play with one of his decks against other people's decks. And then you kind of see, that's how I kind of saw what kind of deck I would like to play. Because I'm not out there just trying to murder and kill people, right? There's some people that are out there. Are some people that build decks just to frustrate you. Just like, oh, you think you're going to do that? And they have 7 cards to go against, like, they're just annoying. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different ways to play. I still don't understand everything because I've only played once, but I'm throwing it out there. If you ever want to play, we can meet up at a Galaxy of Games or at our house and you can play one of his decks. And then you could be like, oh, I really like this. Or you know what? I'm good.
I'm imagining that deck of cards is like the present in Christmas Vacation, that's up there, or Wheezy from Toy Story 2.
Yeah, it's very similar. So if we put that, forgot it was up there.
Speaking of game playing, though, we are going to be at Galaxy of Games. We are having our ugly Christmas sweater episode that you can be a part of. We're going to be at Galaxy Games this Thursday. You can start showing up 6:30, 7 o'clock. They have free games that you can play and try. You can also bring, if you play Pokemon or you play Magic, you can bring your cards and play against other people. And then we're just going to be recording our show. You can be there laughing in the background. We're going to have some voting going on for some movies that we're going to talk about. I'm going to bring some prizes. And then you can get some Christmas shopping done if you want to get a game for your family or for yourself for Christmas.
Yeah.
Now so we're very 90th South and 1817 West.
Yes, I will be creating an event on, there is an event created on our Facebook page. So you can go in and get all the deets there. And then say that you're going, invite other people to go. They have tables. You can bring in a drink, but they also have drinks and treats to buy. It's a pretty fun little neighborhood shop.
Cool.
We're excited to be there. And if you're wondering what a Christmas sweater episode is, well, you're going to find out when you come. But we are picking each of this is our first on-air competition between the three of us, where we are bringing 3 movies each that are masquerading as Christmas movies. They're happening at Christmas time, but aren't necessarily Christmas movies. And I think there's going to be some voting from the audience to decide which is the best.
And we will. Yeah, and we will be giving away a prize for the best ugly Christmas sweater.
Nice.
Yeah.
So bring your A game
sweater.
And make sure you're following us on social media because we have been getting some passes for movie screenings, and you could win. We're doing Avatar: The Way of Water.
Yep, we just gave those away today.
Yeah. So
so
make sure you
there are going to be more of those opportunities, and I mean, we make it. We don't make you do a whole lot to win. We just want you to. Just want to hear from you. Like that's it. It's not like we're asking you to do like backflips or fill out some form.
You're
Like
already on
it's real
Facebook.
easy.
You're already
Um,
scrolling.
You don't have to share, like,
Nope.
comment, send in a blood sample.
Well,
It's
sometimes you have
usually
to comment,
it's usually just comment, but usually
Yeah.
like most places ask you to do like
Yeah.
7 different things.
Nominate 6 friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to do any of that crap.
And here's what's cool. We ask you to comment usually something positive. So think about it. You can put something positive out into social media land.
What? Is that
And
allowed?
that's, it is.
We're gonna get
It
shut
is.
down.
Listen, movies that make us, we've been putting positive stuff into social media land since 2019. All right. That's who we are. So
I can't believe we're coming up on a big anniversary.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're almost at 40. We're like almost toddlers. We're like a toddler podcast.
We still fall over every once in a while. We still pee our pants a little
Absolutely.
bit. But
Just wait till we hit teens or preteens.
Wow, I can't imagine us being all
Tweens.
angsty and
Tweens.
oh man.
Sometimes I don't shower, so I'm already there.
All right. And we are excited. We do get to see Avatar. I was mentioning that in the car to my wife, and my daughter was in the car, and she was really excited because she's really been into Avatar Airbender lately. And she thought it was something related to that. And when I said, no, it's the blue people Avatar, she's like, I hate that movie because it always gets confused with the show that I love. And I'm like, well, okay, that's...
It's a valid point.
But I don't know that she's actually ever seen the original Avatar or is interested in the water. It just isn't.
It just isn't Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I felt really bad because I set her up for big disappointment. I said, well, there is a live action Last Airbender movie. What?
So you didn't.
Why would you do that?
Oh, you're a bad parent.
Or maybe it's good because our kids need to understand that some things in life just make you miserable, but you have to get out of it. And you know what I mean? Like, I think this generation of kids, they don't have to deal with a lot of like miserable things being shoved in their faces all day long, unless they're on social media.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I'm doing. I'm helping her experience misery, I guess. I'm doing her a favor.
No, you're helping her experience it and then overcome it. That's the big thing is.
Yeah.
Well, I did tell her, I did give her a little bit of it. I said, it's not that good. I said, just remember, if you watch it, you always have the animated series to go back and watch. It doesn't disappear because you've watched that.
That's a very good teaching moment. All right. You're a good dad again.
Well, thank you, Tracy. I'm glad I could, because that few minutes where I was a bad dad, it was intense for me.
Oh, I have to say this, speaking of dads. So I went and saw Bill Burr. And this is, I think, like my 3rd time seeing him. He's one of my favorite comedians. And it was so cool because before we went into the Maverick Center, they gave us these little lock pouches and they put our phones and our watches and everything in these little lock pouches so that during the show, you could not have anything electronical out, nothing to take a picture, video, talk on, text on, anything. So we're all holding these little pouches. But then right before he came on stage, they showed a trailer of a new movie that he wrote, directed, produces, and stars in or whatever. And I'm like, well, I mean, I like him, but I mean, that's a lot for, and it's called Old Dads and it looks hilarious. And it's about older guys being dads. And it's got some funny people in it. I don't know that it's a Jake movie. I mean, it's right on the cusp. There's a lot of swears. There's a lot of swears because Bill Burr says all the adult words. Like
I was going to say, Bill Burr's that's kind of his MO. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like he's Dave's spirit animal, Bill Burr. That's
okay.
When Dave really wanted to see how much I could take in his personality, I remember we were dating and we would sit and watch comedy shows. And he's like, so I think we should watch this comedian, Bill Burr. And he kind of like just as we watch, I'm like, okay, that sounds fun. And as I'm watching it, he's just kind of giving me the side eye, like, was that too much for her? Like, was that too much? Because he
It was like a litmus test for the relationship. Okay, how is she going to respond to Bill Burr?
You're in the deep end, right to start.
He just says what's on his mind, and he
Yeah.
he has like an anger management problem, and that's Dave too. Like, Dave's the nicest person, who's got a little anger management problem, and he has no filter. He just says it's here, and then it's here.
Yeah.
And so I love them both, Bill Burr and Dave, in different ways, but I love them.
And you know who else just really doesn't have a filter and just says whatever is on his mind? That would be Pinocchio in Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio.
Ah,
True facts.
that is very good.
All right, I'm gonna say this right now. This is one of the most amazing animated, like the animation. This is some of the most amazing animation you see ever. Like the puppets they used and the stop motion was so flawless and just so amazing. You forget that you're watching a stop motion type animation movie. I mean, and like I love the Corpse Bride. I love Nightmare Before Christmas, Kubo and the Two Strings. All of them pale in comparison to this movie, as far as the animation goes. Is that fair?
I 100% agree. Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, if this
It's
doesn't win
definitely
best,
on my list for animated movie of the year. Like, I have to submit 5 movies in each category, and this I don't know where it's going to be on my list of 5, but it will be on that list.
It's unlike anything you've ever seen before. Like, it's stop motion, but it almost feels like CGI because it is so smooth. Usually in stop motion, you get the little glitches, and that's kind of its charm, and it's there, but it's so slight because it's so well done and so smooth. I don't know how they pulled it off.
And we've talked about this before, but animated movies, sometimes you don't think that it can have the same technical aspects that they have to think about as a live action movie. But this movie, one of the things that I love about it the most is the lighting.
Oh, yes.
Which is something that you don't really think about for an animated movie, because usually it's just like, oh, it's nighttime. Oh, it's daytime. Oh, know, but the lighting in this film is so gorgeous. Like, it brings these deep colors out, and then it brings in these moments and the feelings, and it's one of those things that I could just shut off the sound, which would probably be best for me, and then just watch the movie.
Well, it really stood out to me, just the little details when I was watching it. And there's I don't know what the creature is, Tracy. This is a Del Toro special.
It's a seraphim. It's a seraphim.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the underworld.
But in the underworld, and he's talking to her, and she's got all the eyes along her horn, and they're each blinking individually. I was like, what in the world? I mean, that kind of stuff in this kind of a movie is really, really amazing. And it's funny to me because it is now out on Netflix. You can watch this on Netflix right now. And it's in like the trending section or newly released, and it was right next to the new animated Scrooge movie for us on Netflix, where the animation is CGI and is so poorly done. Like, they should not put the two of them next to each other to make you think like, oh, well, we just watched Pinocchio, maybe we'll check this out, because it just doesn't even hold at all.
I think before we get too deep into this, I think people should know this is not necessarily the Disney version of Pinocchio retold. Robert Zemeckis did that.
It's not.
You've got that. This is not necessarily a movie you're going to sit down with your kids and it's going to be a family favorite. This is much more of an adult tale of Pinocchio than a kid's movie.
I think it's a dramatic, it's the more realistic, dramatic telling of Pinocchio. I think you could sit down with your kids and watch it depending on what they usually watch. But it's not going to be that super magical Disney blue fairy moment. And this is the second Pinocchio movie that we got this year. The live action, of course, we had the one earlier this year with Tom Hanks that
Nobody
not
watched.
good. I mean, I watched it and there were parts of it that I thought were fine, but then I was like, okay, wait a second. We're getting Del Toro, we're getting Ewan McGregor, we're getting Ron Perlman, we're getting Tilda Swinton,
Christoph Waltz,
we're Kate Blanchett,
mm-hmm.
All of this amazing cast plus Del Toro. I mean, it's going to be amazing, and I think I may have set myself up to an expectation that was unrealistic for I just got so excited about how dark it could have been, and then when it didn't
it's pretty dark.
It's dark, but I feel like there were moments where he could have gone further and he didn't, because I just always expect him to not have a wall of. And I feel like there were some parts in this movie where I was like, well, you kind of went off a tangent over here when I really wanted you to stick with this moment and then really go that way, where I felt it was a little long for me.
It's a little long. It kind of
2 hours.
Me. Yeah. And it kind of surprised me that it's kind of a musical, kind of not.
I don't think it was overly musical.
No, but I was surprised that there were musical moments in there.
Yeah, but unless it was Sebastian trying to sing. Every time he tried to sing, something happened, so he couldn't sing his song.
That was great. I did like that.
And it pays homage to the original story where the cricket is unnamed in the original story, and it gets smashed with a hammer by Pinocchio and doesn't appear in the rest of the story. So it's kind of an homage to that, where he keeps getting smushed. But I think the thing that you have to know with Del Toro is he was raised by his grandmother, and his grandmother was a very strict Catholic, and she did not like fantasy. She did not like fairy tales. She did not like monsters. None of that was allowed.
That's weird.
That was all the stuff that he was interested in and loved. And he would actually get punished, but he was like, my love of those things was so great that it overcame that. And there's a lot of mixture of that in this movie. I'm not a Catholic, and I'm not going to say I'm an expert on Catholicism, but this is a very Catholic forward movie. There's a lot of symbolism and stuff in this movie. And so I'd be interested to hear from somebody who maybe is more oriented with the Catholic Church.
I mean, I grew up Catholic, went to Catholic school.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. I mean, how would you know?
Well, you've told me. I forgot.
Yeah, I know. I just think people don't remember it because anyway.
I just thought that was a really good up by Tracy. Have you talk about it, Val? I thought that's what was going on, but
no, I think to me, I didn't think it was overly Catholic. I was like, okay, they're getting a little religious. That's all I thought here. I mean, it does depict a church that resembles what a Catholic church would look like. But I don't think it was for me as growing up Catholic, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, what are they doing? Because I know there are other churches that look very similar. But it is for me, it looks, I thought the religious parts of the movie were interesting. Unexpected for me. And it wasn't, I didn't take it as a slam or
no.
And so I don't want people to think that for me, it was, okay, you're seeing a little bit deeper into what this area of the world is and where they're living and where their thoughts are. But I hesitate sometimes to tell people that there is religious aspects of a movie because I think some people won't see it. I don't think that there is.
It's not overt. No,
it's visual to tell a point. There is a church, and there are visual things that you would see in a Catholic religion or in a Christian religion that are visual to show a point.
Right.
And I do think that it was done very well. I didn't feel like it was being shoved down my throat or that it was putting down any sort of religion. So that I thought that was good, because when I saw it at first, I was like, oh, which way are we going with this? Right. I just kind of held my breath for a minute. And then I was like, okay, it was just a normal, this is there's a church in this area, and this is,
it's central to the town.
Yeah, exactly.
It's part of the
Yeah. So to me, that was cool. I did very much like how they handled religion in the story, because it just felt like it was just a natural part of the day. It wasn't
right. Yeah, it's not overtly. Go ahead, Jake.
Well, I was going to say what's interesting with the religious piece of it, and even like with the fascism that's in it, and just the overall society as a whole, a lot of these movies that are trying to tell a similar story, I think, tend to go super negative on those things. But I think they're in there to show Pinocchio, who's a very different person, and how hard it is for people who are different to
Yes.
fit in with a lot of these normal things. But it's not depicting the priest as a super bad guy. It's not depicting, you know, and I like that, because I think that is really the struggle, right? When someone who you know, you want neurodivergent or whatever, like the way they experience the world, it's just different and hard.
Right.
And it's stuff that we might think is normal, and it's stuff that um nobody's trying to make it difficult and hard. It just is. And I don't know. I liked the tones that it painted with regards to religion, especially. And even, this sounds really weird, but even with the fascism, like the people that were depicted as fascists, other than Mussolini himself, they were just normal, regular people who were just trying to have pride in their country and patriotism and things like that.
And I think that's a key point. I think that's a very key point, because this is a very different Pinocchio. And like you said, he's very innocent. And the thing that I think is interesting here is when you think of like fascism, especially in World War II, everybody talks about how the people were Mussolini's puppets, right? Or and so now you have a movie about a puppet who won't do what he's supposed to do. In the Disney version, Pinocchio is supposed to be a good boy. He's supposed to listen to his parents, listen to adults, do the right thing. And in this Pinocchio is becoming a real boy by expressing himself and by finding out who he is and by going against what he's told to do. And it's interesting too, because he is so innocent, Jake, but then when he's part of the circus, there is no Treasure Island, or Pleasure Island.
Right.
In this version, there's a circus and a fascist training camp. But he's very innocent and he wants approval, and so he does what the puppet master wants him to do to a point. And then he realizes, I don't have to do this. And I loved when they brought Mussolini in, and he completely changes up the act. And you know, I think this is the first time that we've seen wooden animated poo, and
it is that I know of
as a plot point.
Yeah,
yeah, well, that was actually a really cool scene in the movie.
Yeah, you bring up him needing to be a good boy, because in the Disney telling of the story, you're right. Him being a good boy was listening and obeying, and they play that up a little bit in this movie. It's the expectation. That is the definition of good.
Right.
But then at the very end, when Sebastian is like, he was good, it wasn't all about obeying. It was the motives and what drove him. And I think that it's a good thing to do to take a look at, what does it mean to be good. I think in the 40s, when Pinocchio comes out, the Disney animated movie, being good is you do what mom and dad tell you to do. You do what's expected of you. You go to school and whatever. Now we look at it a little bit differently and a little bit deeper, as far as, well, what are the motives? Because you can do all of those things and be a horrible person, because what's really driving you to do it. And, you know, he's doing the things that he's doing not out of spite. He's not being disobedient out of spite. He's doing it just because he doesn't understand. He doesn't know, and he's trying to figure stuff out. But when he has to make a tough decision, he makes the right decision.
Right decision. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I like what you said, Jake, about really following, or maybe it was Tracy. Sorry, we've all been talking a lot. Like really following what he thinks he needs to do, following that storyline. And I love that they followed Geppetto's storyline a little bit more. They really showed how you deal with grief.
Yes.
And how, I think it was about acceptance, right? Is that we're accepting, it's hard to accept something that's different. And when somebody experiences grief in a really hard way, they become a different person. Mm-hmm. And when you live in a small community like that, you're no longer that cheery person that somebody sees every day. You don't have that rhythm of you and your partner every day, or you and your son every day, or whatever it is. And Geppetto is really going through something very, very difficult that he can't let go. And people are treating him like really kind of like shunning him because he can't get over it. And I think we've all kind of either experienced that, or we've seen somebody kind of go through a really hard transition like that. And I like that it deals with that, because we don't really get into Geppetto's character a lot in most of the versions that we've seen.
Right.
And I do love that we see that. And I do love Ewan McGregor's character of the cricket. I think because his job is not easy, especially like Pinocchio is he doesn't know what's going on. And so if you take like a kid that doesn't know anything and they're already like 8 years old, right?
Yeah.
But they don't know anything, that kid's a brat, right? And they don't like, not on purpose, but
they just don't know.
They don't know. And just if you have to maintain like overseeing that kid.
Well, and I really liked at the end when they asked Jiminy if he was truly his conscience, if he did, and he was like, probably not, like, and I like the fact that Pinocchio had to find out a lot of this stuff on his own.
Yeah.
He didn't have Jiminy there as the Deus Ex Machina who shows up at the last second and tells him, no, this is wrong. Pinocchio's got to figure out a lot of this on his own, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Tracy, it's not really a musical, and we kind of talked about the first song in it. It's interesting because most of the songs are from Pinocchio. Like, nobody else really has a song that they sing in this.
That's true.
And I think that highlights how he is, that innocence, and that he is so different from everybody around him.
That's a great point.
I was thinking about, like, what are the songs that, like, he showed when he comes to life for the first time and he's singing about what is it, what's it for, and trying to figure out what everything is, and then singing about his papa, and then singing, really, I think he had, except again for when Sebastian J. Cricket is trying to sing and they shut it down every time. I think it kind of just highlights how different Pinocchio is from everybody else, and it kind of creates that feeling of, he doesn't blend in at all.
Yeah.
And he's never wearing clothes.
Yeah.
Like,
which, I mean, he's made out of wood.
Yeah. So Val, going back to your point on grief, and I think this is one of the key moments of the movie, is when Geppetto really kind of loses it during the thunderstorm, and he ends up chopping down the tree that his son had planted, the pine cone, and had grown into the tree. And we don't really see Geppetto in these scenes. We see his shadow, and it's very much like a Frankenstein's monster. Like, it's kind of this old school Gothic horror of showing the shadows and letting that tell the story with the flashes of the lightning. It's just absolutely gorgeous animation. Like, the level of detail that they put into this is mind boggling. I really hope that they have like we saw a screener version. I haven't seen the Netflix version. I'm really hoping there's like an extras section with like some of the behind the scenes and stuff.
There's not, I don't know if there's an extra section, but if you go to it on Netflix, the movie, and right next to it is kind of a documentary type thing talking about how they made it. And I haven't watched it yet, but it's right there, so you can watch both of them.
I'll check that out.
I also have a pretty incredible book that they sent me that has the breakdown of the animation of the characters that you should definitely read, but I definitely want that back because it's real. I love the look of this movie so much. I love the look of Pinocchio. I love that he's clunky and weird and awkward and, you know, not necessarily like easy to look at. You know what I mean? Because I feel like all of the other versions of Pinocchio is this familiar, like, okay, I could kind of get this. But if you saw this Pinocchio walking down the road, like you wouldn't, it's kind of creepy, like,
especially
and
when
awkward.
especially when he's first introduced, when he first comes to life. It again plays into Guillermo's horror background in that it's all spindly legs and it's like something out of The Thing, and it's like Pinocchio's trying to orient himself, and it freaks Geppetto out, which makes perfect sense. And then, you know, Geppetto ends up locking him in the cupboard because he doesn't know what this is or why it's here.
Yeah. And he does some of the crawling that he does at that point is really, really creepy and weird looking. I agree. It's just
like the Ring,
like there are moments where this is undeniably a Del Toro film. Like you just can't. I mean, the whole thing visually is very much distinct and everything, but I just feel like there are definite moments where it's like, yeah, this is definitely Del Toro's work, and I think that's
especially when they go into the underworld. And I think it's interesting because the pine cone is much more of a pagan symbol, but it represents a lot of times rebirth. And so you have Pinocchio, who was born from and carved and created from a pine tree that was created and grown by a pine cone. And so he doesn't necessarily die. And there's a slight comparison a little bit between Pinocchio, the wooden boy, and the wooden Jesus. Like, he looks at the Jesus and says, well, he's made out of wood and people like him. Why don't people like me? And so I think there's kind of, and I don't think it was overt, but I like the idea of that rebirth metaphor coming through there again. And he goes into the underworld, and that is primo Del Toro right there. Like the seraphim, like Jake, you were talking about, with the big wings, which is, you know, and then you've got the rabbits voiced by Tim Blake Nelson, who for some reason are speaking Yiddish. I'm not sure why, but it works, you know, at least for me, it works. So
yeah.
But the lighting, the coloring, the blues, the yellows is just stunning.
Yeah, and every setting had its own coloring, so you made it all feel very distinct. Like the training camp that they were in, it was like, does the sun ever rise in this place? Because it's dark all the time, and it's the grays and the underworld with that deep blue. And he's like, oh yeah, there's lots of blue sand, and like you feel that it carries over, and that in juxtaposition to the other spirit that comes, and that's kind of the light blue. And the coloring is just amazing through the film. So
I when it comes to the story, there were so many cool, like, different storylines that at some point during the movie, and this is where it lost me a little bit, is that I feel like you could break this Pinocchio up and make a short series out of it, because you have the story of Geppetto and his son, right? And what that looked like before. And I'd like to see a little bit more of that. Like, he gives you enough where you're curious, which is a Del Toro thing, like just enough that you're curious, but then I'm going to take you over in this direction. And then you have, you know, the story of, you know, Geppetto trying to get through that, but years later just cannot get through it. And now, you know, he has this moment, and then he makes Pinocchio, and you have Pinocchio come to life. Well, then you have Pinocchio and him trying to deal with day-to-day stuff, trying to go to school, trying to do all this stuff. But at the same time, you've got this war going on.
Right.
And then Pinocchio he goes to war, and he goes to this training camp, which is a whole nother, you know, story. Then you've got the underworld. Then you've got the redemption. Then you've got you could do 4 to 5 different, you know, half-hour to 45-minute series just on these different storylines. And so for me, I felt like, as much as I thought they were all interesting, it may have been one too many for me. But at the same time, I hate saying that, because I love what he did with doing the circus or sideshow instead of, I've never loved that island, the Pleasure Island. I've always thought that was such a I loved it even less in the other version of Pinocchio this year. I don't love that. But what they did there, and then bringing in the war and bringing in the like that community at the time and fascism and all that stuff. I love it when you can take something like an animated story and really bring in topics that we should talk about.
Yes.
But they don't. You don't you don't know that you're learning something or that you sparked something that you would go and learn more about later, right? But I think the pacing of all of these different moments is where I get lost.
Well,
There are some just long moments in between these cool things that if they would have tightened up as a movie, it would have felt better for me. Whereas I would get excited and then I was just like, ugh, and then I would get excited and then I think it was the pacing.
Well, one thing I think is interesting is in the Disney Pleasure Island, you have boys who are doing bad things because they can, because they're giving into their inner id. Like they can smoke, they can gamble, they can fight, they can eat candy, they can do pool, they can do all of these things that they're not supposed to do. And again, it goes back to the being a good boy. And in this version, it is taking these innocent kids and training them for war. And so it's like you're making them do bad things. And it's a corruption of innocence as opposed to there's kind of this evil inside of them that they need to get out and then they become jackasses, you know. And in this one, it is more about the corruption of the youth, which I thought was a really beautiful thing. And this really ties into, it's almost like a trilogy if you look at it, with The Devil's Backbone, Pan's Labyrinth, and now Pinocchio. These are three movies that deal with fascism, life, death, redemption, all of these things, and it really forms out nicely.
It's interesting looking at the training camp kind of sequence because I have a love-hate relationship with that sequence in this movie. I think out of everything that happens, that one to me, the transition to it and everything feels the most forced. It kind of comes, this is always something that's going on in the background, this war and everything else that's going on in the background. But then all of a sudden he's thrust into that after the whole story up to that point has been about him being on this sideshow and this carnival and everything. And then ultimately that's what leads to him being in the ocean and getting swallowed by the dogfish and all of that. But to me, it was just a little bit jarring how they got to that point. But I also love a lot of the interactions that happen at the training camp. Like you talk about that wearing away of innocence and everything else. They go and they have the big competition where they're shooting each other and everything else. And he and Candlewick find a way for them to both win, for them to both tie. But in war, you can't do that. That's not in the rules. There's not a tie in war. I'm not trying to argue the semantics of war, but I'm just saying that's not the attitude, right?
It's not football.
Right.
There's no ties.
Soccer.
Football.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. But, and then in that moment when they come back and they're like, yeah, we found a way for us to both win. And he's like, okay, Candlewick, shoot the puppet. Like,
yeah,
it's very dark and very, very painful to watch. I just feel like I don't know how you fit that in the story better than they did. I just didn't feel like the transition to it just was hard for me.
Okay.
And maybe that's where where you mentioned it being a series, it might work a little bit better.
Yeah.
But so it's kind of a love-hate for me on that part.
I like,
because I don't want it to go away. I just don't know how to fit it in better.
Right. I love the design of the whale. I thought that was really cool. And that was definitely a Guillermo del Toro monster. It wasn't just your typical average whale, but I liked too, I don't know, there was just something with the idea of there being like a lighthouse inside a whale that I thought was just kind of cool. And I liked how they escaped. They didn't have to, start the fire. They did something different with it, which again plays into, you have the stuff that you're familiar with from the Disney version of Pinocchio, but then there's enough that's different that makes it interesting and exciting. Whereas I felt like the latest recreation with Robert Zemeckis, it felt like we're just going to retell this story step by step by step by step by step, and it's a recreation.
And not a better,
because
not a better
Disney,
recreation.
New. Yeah.
That's how Disney does their live action movies.
I know.
Is they want
to not all of them. Not all of them. Just
most
the
of
recent
them,
ones.
Most of them.
Under Chapek, they sure did.
You got new
a
Bob
lot of them
back.
happened with Iger too. Beauty
It
and the
did.
Beast was pre-Chapek, and it was 100%. Just a
I
recreation
hope
of the
they're
animated.
learning their lesson. But yeah, don't tell me the same story beat for beat. Give me, like, I love cover songs. Okay, I love when I hear a song that I'm familiar with and that I like, but then somebody puts their own spin on it, their own twist to it. That gets me super excited. Like if you have somebody who takes like an AC/DC song and all of a sudden they're adding like bluegrass to it. And when it works, it's like, okay, that's cool. That's something that's really interesting me. And that's how I felt with this Pinocchio. I'm like, okay, this isn't just a retelling. This is a new version. And in a lot of ways, it really fits in with the modern times because we are kind of we're on a precipice in a lot of fronts. And we have to decide as a society, are we going to give into our darker impulses? Are we going to shun the people who are different from us? Are we going to punish them for being different? Are we going to kill people for disobeying? Or are we going to become better people? I think that's kind of just human existence, but it feels like it's kind of heightened right now with a lot that's going on in society. There's a lot of hatred and a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of not accepting people for who they are and letting them live their lives. And that's something we definitely need to work on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we've gotten really deep on this episode more than normally, which is great. I think this movie is a kind of movie that does make you stop and think a little bit more. And I do love that it's its own spin. I mean, obviously this is Del Toro's movie 100%, and you can tell the skeleton is there of the original Pinocchio story, but he definitely made it his own, which I think is great. I did find myself thinking at times, I wonder which one is more canon, and then I realized I am too big a nerd, and I need to stop thinking about movies that way because because that's the whole conversation about the Lord of the Rings series, about Star Wars. I just need to move on with my life.
And I'm familiar with the book, but I haven't read it. But I know enough.
It's dark. It's dark.
Yeah. But the thing that I think is fun too, Jake, is because he had so much fun making this movie, he's actually talking now, and he's talked about it for years, but he's talking about going back and doing In the Mountains of Madness, which is the famous story. Who's the author? Lovecraft. It's a Lovecraft story. And he originally tried to do with Tom Cruise, and the studio killed it because it was going to be too expensive. But now he's thinking that he might do it as a stop motion, full on horror picture. So I'm like, all right, I'm interested.
I would love to see him do another film or two like this. They are time consuming and they're hard to make. And so I get that it may not be what you like.
Yeah, this was like
all you ever want to do and try to. Yeah. So, but I would love to see more.
The thing with Del Toro, it's like you said, Jake, you can tell that it's his film. Like he's got his own visual stamp to it, which I like because you don't often get that. Because a lot of our movies, let's be honest, are kind of cookie cutter, right? They're really formulaic. They all kind of look the same. I love the Marvel movies, and there's a few that stand out, but they really do fit this formula, and they all kind of have to look the same. And same with a lot of our dramas, but Del Toro's out here just coming up with something completely different. Like I wouldn't have guessed that he would have done Pinocchio after he did what's the one the last year with the circus, the black and white film. Anyway, but like The Shape of Water, like Hellboy, is like he does something so different. Like
he does something different. He does something different with each movie, but each movie still feels like his movie, even though it is still visually different. And I feel like there are a few directors that can pull that off. I think Del Toro's one. I think Tim Burton is another one where you can tell it's a Tim Burton movie, but you can also tell it's a different movie from the other ones that he's made.
Nightmare
did
Alley.
Nightmare Alley, but
That's
it wasn't black and white.
Yeah.
I was like, black
There's
and white.
There's a black and white version that I watched. Yeah.
Another
All right.
one that was visually beautiful, but just needed the pacing for me. And maybe I'm just not a Del Toro pacing person. I don't know. I visually it was beautiful, but like you said, I love it, Tracy, when somebody takes something that we know and then like a cover song, and then they put their own twist on it. And I very much think that this is something that we've seen done all pop and beautiful. So this is a Britney Spears song done by Tool. And so I think there are some really, really cool things about it. But at the same time, it's a little off because you're like, wait a second. Like,
that's a really good comparison.
Yeah. And I'm going to give it a B minus.
Okay.
It's still in the B's. I would have given it a total solid B if the pacing would have been just a little bit better for me, because I do think, like, again, for animated movies of the year, like, this is some of the best animation I've ever seen. The coloring, the lighting, just like all of the cool, like, intricate details that he puts in each scene. Like, you can freeze a frame.
Yeah.
And there are so many things to look at, which is really, really cool. And just, how each character has their own little thing going on, like I could watch it again just to, kind of get the characters' little quirks, what I mean? And to do that in stop motion, to do that in any animation, it takes time.
Yeah.
It takes, because you could just say, well, nobody's going to pay attention. Nobody's going to know that this one guy has a little bit of a limp, or that this, because it's animation, and you're not expecting much from your audience. But Del Toro knows that his audiences come to see all those little idiosyncrasies, and he gives it to us. And the acting was great. The characters, I really loved the characters, but for me it felt a little long in some places that I don't like. I'd have to think, okay, do I want to watch that today? Like, I really want to watch it, but do I can I get through it? Because it just feels a little long and a little slow in some parts. But it still is going to be in my top 5 animated movies of the year.
The way we started, I thought we were looking at like in the low C's. So I'm good with a B minus.
I don't know that I could ever give Del Toro like a C anything, just because he is brilliant. And again, not every movie or filmmaker is for everyone. And I respect everything that he does. And I know there's an audience that will watch this movie and think they didn't get enough. Like, it was like 2 hours wasn't enough. They could have done 2.5 hours. It's just, it wasn't that for me, but I understand how it could be that for other people.
Yeah.
I think for me, I'm probably going to give this a B plus, which is probably the most common grade that I give out, but we watch a lot of good movies on this show. So I do think there were a couple of story problems. I think it is 2 hours a long time for an animated movie, and maybe that's part of it. But I told you up front, Tracy, when you handed me the movie, that I'm not a big fan of the Pinocchio story, just in general. For me to sit down and say, I'm going to sit down and watch a movie for 2 hours about a story that I just don't even really care for, and then to come out of that and say it's a B plus, that's a win, Del Toro. And I want to recognize that, because the animation is just amazing. It sucks you in right away. If you watch this on Netflix, make sure you're watching it on a device hooked to your TV and not just on your little phone.
Yeah, don't watch it on your phone.
No, I honestly think I would have felt differently about it if I would have seen it in the theater. I think I probably would have. I probably would have been more like a B plus for me if I would have seen it.
This movie deserves a big screen. You're right.
Yeah, so watch it on what you can that's big, so you can be immersed in the whole thing, because it does suck you in right away. But I do think the training sequence, although necessary, and I really loved it, it just felt weird where it was placed and how it was placed, and I don't know how they do it better. So maybe that's just a really bad criticism on my part. But overall, I enjoyed it. For me, this is probably the definitive version of Pinocchio more than the classic Disney version. However, if you are a huge fan of the classic Disney version, please go into this knowing it's completely different, because you're going to be very, very upset at the end of the movie if you're thinking, oh, this is going to be just like the Disney. It's not. And you need to know that going into it. And if that's going to bother you to the point where you feel like it, just don't watch the movie and watch.
Right.
And I like them both.
And that's okay.
I know that they're made for different audiences.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
And that's why I said up front, this is a movie that you don't just put on because it's Pinocchio and you're just going to put it on for the kids. Like, I think there's stuff that they'll like, but this is much more of a teenage and adult film than a children's film.
It's a mature film.
It's a mature film. Yeah. Were you done, Jake, or did you have more?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna go A- on this one. I felt like it is just a titch long, but I love that it surprised me. It took me in different directions. Like I said, I love the idea of this being set during 1930s Italy, which we don't often see. If you think World War, you start thinking of Germany, you know, and that's much more that you don't think as much of what was happening in Italy. It's a Guillermo del Toro film. It's dark, it's mature, but it's whimsical. There's this balance with him where it's the bizarre and the unusual and the creepy, yet with heart. And I think the thing that struck me is the marionettes and the stop motion puppets and the backgrounds, like Val said, are so detailed and so realistic. Like, you feel like you could reach into your screen and touch Pinocchio, right? Like, you know kind of what he feels like. There's this rough texture to him. And then you have the stuff like the underworld and the dead rabbits and the seraphim, and it's kind of this mixture. And then you have Mussolini showing up for the performance, and you have Pinocchio holding up wooden poo and shaking his butt at him, you know, kind of rebelling against that authoritarianism. It's unlike anything you'll see it, like Jake said, on the biggest TV you've got. Don't watch this on your phone. Don't watch this even on a tablet. Watch this up on a bigger screen. But it is not the Disney version. It is definitely not. So I really enjoyed this. I want to see it again. Is it one that I'm just going to pop on a Friday night? No. But it's another film where I feel like Guillermo del Toro is one of the more interesting, whether or not you like him, whether or not you agree with all of his pieces, because there are some of his films that are lesser to me. Like, he's not like a god where he can't do anything wrong. But this fits right into the pantheon with him, and he continues to surprise me and delight me. So I'm going A-.
And it still makes me sad every time I watch a movie of his to think that he's not going to be doing the Haunted Mansion for us. So I think that's dead, right?
In another universe that exists, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Pinocchio, check it out. It's going to get a lot of hype as award season rolls out. It's going to be nominated for Best Animated Picture for sure. And I think it deserves.
I don't know if I would go this one or Marcel. I think I'll say this. I think Pinocchio is going to win for Best Animated Film. I like Marcel a little bit more. Like, I enjoyed Marcel a little bit more. This isn't necessarily a fun movie.
Yeah. But I think looking at Marcel and looking at Pinocchio, Disney did not bring enough of their A game this year to win Best Animated Feature.
Not even close.
Between those two, I think. So normally we would say we won't see you at the movies, but this week you have two opportunities to see us. Number one, Tuesday night, we will be seeing Hour the Way of Water. You have an opportunity to win tickets to that. Go to our Facebook page and comment on our post. Your favorite James Cameron movie, I believe, is the question that we're asking there. Like, that's a softball. Just go. That's easy to answer, right? For you.
We don't, you could lie. Like, we don't even, we're not going to fact check this.
Even if it's
really
a true
love True Lies?
You could, yeah.
I mean, I kind of did.
Yeah. But yeah, it's not like we're going to call you out on it. That is just your way to get entered into the random drawing to find out who's going to go, or however we do that. So please go there and do that. Also, Thursday we will be in West Garden, Galaxy of Games. We will be talking about movies that happen at Christmas time, but maybe aren't Christmas movies. And we'll be discussing that. Come in your ugly sweater, play some games, get some Christmas presents. We would love to see you there. So normally we'd say we won't see you, but we will. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on all of or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd love your support there. And we just appreciate you listening here. And now I feel like I can't say we won't see you in the movies, but all right, we'll see you later. We might this week. This is your chance.
See, and here's where I should sing one of the Pinocchio songs, but I can't get my voice to go up that high. So we'll just
no, I don't. I would love to see you try, but I think it will.
No, you don't.
We'll just end it here.
This has been an Age of Geek media production.